Man arrested in murder of released sex offender, the Sean Small case. Sometimes, a story emerges from the shadows that forces us to confront some of society's darkest questions. What happens when someone who has committed terrible crimes in the past is set free? Do they deserve a second chance, or does their past forever mark them as a danger? And what happens when a community, haunted by fear, decides it can no longer live with that risk? In the small seaside town of Newcastle, County Down, in Northern Ireland, residents believed they knew who lived among them. They waved to their neighbors, walked the same streets every morning, and went to the same shops each week. But beneath that thin layer of quiet civility, one man's presence was like a shadow cast over the community. His name was Sean Small. He was 84 years old. And while to some he looked like nothing more than a frail, elderly man nearing the final years of his life, others knew the darker truth. He was a convicted sex offender, recently released from prison. By late August, his name would make national headlines again. But this time, it wasn't for his past crimes. It was because he was found brutally murdered outside his own home. His lifeless body discovered between August 19th and August 24th. His death quickly became one of the most disturbing and controversial murder cases in recent Northern Irish history. Authorities soon announced that a man in his 40s had been arrested in connection with the crime. The killing sparked outrage, debate, and whispers of vigilante justice. Was this a targeted act of retribution? Or had an elderly man, despite his past, become the victim of something far more complex and sinister? Tonight, we explore the haunting case of Sean Small, the man with a dark past, a community with heavy secrets, and a murder that raises questions about justice, vengeance, and the thin line that separates them. To understand why this case struck such a nerve, we first need to know who Sean Small really was. Born in the 1940s, Small had lived through decades of change in Northern Ireland. But the life he carved out was not remembered for good deeds or quiet living. It was defined by his crimes. Sean Small had been convicted of serious sexual offenses, crimes that forever tainted his reputation and destroyed the lives of his victims. Details of those convictions remain deeply disturbing, leaving many to feel he had long forfeited the right to ever walk freely again. And yet, the justice system had spoken. He served his sentence, and like so many offenders before him, was eventually released. For some, this was proof of rehabilitation, of a system functioning as intended. But for many others, especially those who lived in Newcastle, County Down, the idea of this man, this convicted predator, being back among them, was nothing short of terrifying. Neighbors whispered. Parents warned their children. Conversations in the pub or on the high street often carried a single name, Sean Small. He wasn't just a man returning home. He was a symbol of everything people feared about offenders re-entering society. And then, just weeks after his release, tragedy struck. Between August 19th and August 24th, 2024, police discovered Sean Small's body outside his home. The scene was grim. An elderly man, yes, but also a man whose violent past lingered like a curse. The brutality of his death shocked even seasoned investigators. This wasn't the quiet passing of an old man. It was violent, deliberate, and cold. Within days, authorities made an announcement. A man in his 40s had been arrested for Small's murder. They withheld his name, but the arrest raised an immediate and troubling question. Was this an act of personal vengeance? Did someone in the community finally decide that Sean Small should pay the ultimate price for his past? The police were careful in their wording. They appealed to the public for information, offering a staggering £20,000 reward to anyone who could shed light on what had happened. This wasn't just a local story anymore. It had become a national headline. News outlets from The Guardian to regional broadcasters reported on it. Each detail only added to the tension. Some argued that Sean Small's past crimes made it impossible to see him as a victim. He had it coming, some voices whispered online. Others, however, recoiled at the suggestion. No matter his past, no matter his sins, he had been sentenced, served his time, and paid his debt to society, or at least, that's how the justice system saw it. To murder him now was not justice. It was lawlessness. This debate, Justice versus vengeance lies at the heart of the Sean Small case. For investigators, however, it was about hard evidence. Who killed Sean Small and why? Was it a random act of violence? A burglary gone wrong? Or was it the darker possibility that someone had targeted him deliberately because of who he was and what he had done? The man in custody, reportedly in his 40s, has yet to have his full story told publicly. But the arrest itself sent a chill through Newcastle, because if this was vigilante justice, it meant that anger had spilled over into bloodshed. And once that line is crossed, how far can it go? Communities across the UK have long wrestled with the question of released sex offenders. There are often protests when such individuals are housed near schools, playgrounds, or family neighborhoods. Vigilante attacks are not unheard of. In some cases, names and addresses have been leaked, leading to mobs descending on homes. Sometimes, innocent people have even been targeted by mistake, mistaken for offenders because of rumor and paranoia. The Sean Small murder sits squarely in that uneasy space. On one hand, his history made him a pariah, someone most people would not defend. On the other hand, his murder, if motivated by the history, represents something society claims to reject, taking the law into your own hands. When the £20,000 reward was announced, it became clear that investigators feared silence from the community. Would neighbors protect the accused? Would they see him as a hero rather than a criminal? The reward was not just money, it was an incentive to break through that wall of silence. But behind the headlines, behind the police appeals, lies a darker, more personal story. Sean Small had lived to 84. He had carried the weight of his convictions for years. He had been released not because people forgave him, but because the system required it. Yet in the end, he died not in prison, not in a hospital, but violently on the ground outside his own home. It is here that the story of Sean Small transforms from the tale of one man to a mirror reflecting society's deepest contradictions. Can a person ever truly pay for their crimes? Does time serve to erase the horror of what they once did? Or will the community, scarred and distrustful, always wait for an opportunity to balance the scales themselves? The Newcastle case remains under investigation. The man in custody awaits his day in court. The £20,000 reward still hangs in the air, waiting for someone to step forward. And in the silence between official statements and breaking news updates, the town of Newcastle carries on, haunted, perhaps, by the knowledge that one man's death may not have brought justice, but only more questions. In the end, the story of Sean Small is not just about a murder. It is about the fragile line between justice and vengeance, law and chaos, forgiveness and hatred. It forces us to ask, when a man like Sean Small is released, who is really on trial, the offender, or the society forced to live alongside him? And it leaves us with one final chilling thought. If the system cannot protect us, how many more might take justice into their own hands? This is the case of Sean Small, and it is a case that will not soon be forgotten. If you want to hear the full truth behind more cases like this, the stories that unsettle, disturb, and force us to question everything, make sure you hit subscribe True Crime Spectrum right now. Stay with us as we uncover the darkest corners of crime and the fragile search for justice.